Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. Today we are going to cover some REST API interview questions. So without any further delay, let's get started. So very first thing is what is REST and what is RESTful Web Services. So REST is nothing but representational state transfer. So what happens is you have some data in database. So I'll give you one example, okay? So one example is like, this is something we have already seen, right? We have one application, say Spring REST API demo. We have one controller which is having get mapping, post mapping. This is for get the data, this is for add for the data. We have one entity, we have one repository, and we have our YAML file updated with the database properties and Hibernate properties. We have already seen all these things in all the previous videos, including Spring CRUD and microservices. So I'm not going to explain you each and everything again. We are just going to use this to understand what is REST all about. So what happens is we have an employee. This is my employee ID. This is my name. So this is my entity. This is nothing but a POJO, which is capable enough to be added as a database entity into database. Now we have one and code decode, which is stored in database. I am the client. Say Postman is my client. Now my client wants that if I give you one ID, say 1, please give me all the details of that particular employee, including the ID and its name. So I'm sending the ID and I'm getting the name. So what is this? This is nothing but the POJO. It is nothing but a JSON format of the entity of employee stored in the table. So this is the transfer of state. So this is my employee. The state of this employee is in a record in a database. It is transferred over a network using HTTP protocol using the REST APIs to my client. So this is my REST API, which is being hit over a protocol uses HTTP. So this is the transfer of state from database to my client in the JSON format. You can also have it in XML format. You can have it in multiple formats, text, HTML, many ways. So this is the transfer of state of employee from database to your client, which is nothing but Postman. So do you understand? REST is the transfer of state. And the way to do that in the API format is RESTful Web Services or the REST APIs. So what are RESTful Web Services? RESTful Web Services are nothing but web services that follows the REST architectural concept. Now you will ask me, what is REST architectural concept? The REST architectural concept is nothing but being completely stateless and following client-server architecture, a particular client. So this is my Postman. So what is this? This is client. This is Postman. From Postman, I want to hit your database. So where is my database? A database is connected to a server called as localhost. So this is my database. It is an employee entity whose ID is 1, name is code decode. Now I want this whole entity to be transferred from this database to my Postman. So it is going to hit with the ID and expect the response as 1 code decode. How would you do that? So there is nothing but a interface or abstraction, which is nothing but REST API. This REST API is capable enough to become an intermediate between your client and your server. So you will ask me, what is server here? Server is nothing but localhost :8081. So there is a port where I have started my Tomcat. That is nothing but my server. So Tomcat is my server. This is my database which is connected to your server. So from client you are hitting your server and expecting a result. The way to do that over with the HTTP protocol over the network is REST API. So if this much is clear, let me quickly move ahead. If you understand what is REST, what is RESTful Web Services, what is the architecture that REST architectural concepts is nothing but stateless and client-server architecture. So we have seen this is client, this is server. It is nothing but an architectural style for developing applications that can be accessed over a network. How would you access anything over a network? Using HTTP or HTTPS protocol in terms of REST APIs. In last few days, we have heard a lot that re-level tests are very costly. You don't want to pay $199 or $1,799 even after discount. And hence, just for you people, re-level announce that all their tests are going to be completely free of cost. The way to sign up is the same. Sign up to the re-level. Select your test of choice, that is backend development, front-end development or business development. Book a slot that you want to give to test to. Slots are limited, so book it really fast. Create a neat and clean video resume where you talk about yourself, your experience and your career aspirations. And this video resume should for sure be submitted within 24 hours after selecting and confirming to your slot. Once you click on confirm, you will get all the rounds link and it should be completed in one single day. You will get your scores within the 7 days. The best part of this test is that firstly it is completely free. Secondly, the entire process takes only 15 days. So candidate can get job within 15 days. Lastly, the cutoff is 700. If you are not happy with your score, you can reappear for the test, which is the best part. And Relevel is offering amazing prizes for those top 50 scorers who make it to the leaderboard. These prizes includes Apple Watches, MacBook, iWatches and many more. So all the very best. Hope you get most out of it. Now you'll ask me, what is HTTP resources? The very important concept of REST API is REST resource. So every content in REST architecture is considered as a resource. So in our scenario, 1, code decode, which is nothing but an object of my employee class as an entity, is nothing but a resource. So client expects a resource from a server. Server goes to the database, fetches your resource and give it to your client. So what moves here and there is nothing but a resource. So every content which client expects from a server and server responds with to the client is nothing but a resource. So in our case, resource is analogous to an object in object-oriented programming world, which is nothing but an entity. Now, it can be represented as text file, HTML pages, images or any dynamic data. So I'll give you one example. So this is one of the example. When I hit a particular URL, this is nothing but an HTTP, a particular URL. When hitting this particular thing, I get a page, I get a image. This image is nothing but a resource. So it can be a text file, an HTML page, an image, anything. When you hit over the HTTP or the network, you get a response. So this is client server architecture. This browser that you see upon is client. Wikipedia is your server. This is the en.wikipedia.org is your server. It is giving you a response in terms of an image. So this image is nothing but a resource. The REST server provides access to these resources, whereas REST client consumes or accesses these resources. I've already told you what does this mean. Every resource is identified by the means of URI. What is URI? URI is Uniform Resource Identifier, which is used to identify each resource of the REST architecture. So if I say this image is a resource, how do you access this resource from client? Through this URI. Until unless you don't have the proper URI, you won't be able to hit the server and server will not understand what do you actually want. So this is a very important part of the REST API or the REST architecture. So first important thing that we learned is resource. This image is a resource. Second, how to access the resource through a URL. So this URI is nothing but a very important part of your architecture. So what is it in the format? The format of URI is always protocol. So what is my protocol? HTTPS is my protocol, / service name. So what is my service name? en.wikipedia.org. Now there comes the resource type. The resource type is wiki. Then what is my resource ID? This is the unique identifier of all the resources present on a particular resource type on a server. So this is my unique resource ID, representational state transfer, and hitting this particular thing, you will get something as a resource. It can be anything. It can be an image like I've shown you. It can be a document. It can be anything. Now URI are of two types, URN and URL. Now this is a complex thing. If you want me to cover this, ask me in the comment section. Then only I'm going to cover it. Else I'm going to skip it for now to make it much more simpler for you. What are the HTTP methods now? HTTP methods are nothing but HTTP verbs. These are major portion of your URI restrictions followed by the rest that specify the action to be followed. Too much of theory, let me explain it directly to you. HTTP methods are nothing but a way to interact to your server. So for example, we have 4 type of major verbs we use in HTTP methods, that is get, post, port and delete. So this is nothing but CRUD. So let me explain you through an example first. This stands for creation, retrieval, updation, deletion. Now REST API gives you very flexibility to give you these methods. With post you can create your object. With R, that is retrieval, with get method you can get your object. With update you have nothing but put. This is the method to update your data onto your server. Delete, you again have a delete mapping. This helps you to delete a resource on the server. So these are all resources which you work upon. If you are using post method, you are going to create a resource onto the server. If you're using get, then you're going to retrieve a resource from the server. If you're using put, you're going to update a data on the server through your client. Delete, you're going to delete some data on the server. So this is how the REST API flows with these methods. Get is used to fetch data from database. This is read-only operation. Post is used to create new resource. Put is used to update existing resource or replace the resource. And delete is used to delete the resource. Now you'll ask me something in demonstration for sure. So I have already the things ready for you. Okay, so this is my get mapping. You give your ID and you will retrieve your employee object. So I have the instance ready with me. So this is my get, this is my method, this is my URI, where this URI is mapped to this particular instance of controller. Now when you hit this particular thing, you get a response. So this is the resource which you received. So you are expecting a resource and you got the resource. Now you'll ask me that in post and put you're doing the same thing, you're doing the save. So what's the difference? That's a very nice question the interview might ask you. What's the difference between post and put? So very important difference between post and put is that if you can consider here, I'm just passing the name and 1 comma code decode is returned as a resource to me, that is added to the database. But in put, I'm passing you the ID and the name because I want to update the name here. So if okay, so I'll try to run this for you. Currently, I'll show you how my database is currently. So I'll refresh it for you. So this is 1 comma code decode. Now if I fire this particular put method or put REST API to update your controller with the code decode updated one name, what you can see. So I got a resource which is updated one. So it is expecting that since it is put, it is going to update a resource on database or on server. So you can see when I refresh, I can see that my data is refreshed on the server through to the database. So this is the difference between post and put. Post is nothing but, and there is a basic difference between idempotency. So I'll cover idempotency first. So very important point to note here. Idempotent in terms of maths is when you n number of times hit a particular request to a particular operation, you will get the same response. That is idempotency. But it is different in case of REST API. Idempotency in the case of REST API is in terms of the space which is handled by your database. So if you can see here, this is a table named as employee. This table has some data. Now if you put some operation onto this table's row, if the number of rows is exceeding, then you are capturing some space onto your hard disk. From where do you think this space is given to this particular database? Obviously, there must be some space occupied by this table onto your hard disk or onto your memory. If the memory is changed or more memory is given or less memory is given, then you can say that it is not idempotent. This is my post. Okay, so if I try again with name comma code decode and I put again. So can you see another row is created? If I put it again, another row is created. So this is not idempotent because my request remains the same, but my response changes. And not only just response changes, my database is also changed. So I have 3 rows here now. So my memory is increased and hence there is change in memory, and hence I can say this is not idempotent because the space on the hard disk is changed for this particular table. This is what is idempotency in terms of REST API. So you can understand that post is not idempotent, whereas put is idempotent. Why? Because in put, I give you an ID, go and update on this particular thing. So I'm going to update it again. I'm going to give you an ID, say 2, and I'm going to update it to updated 2. If I send again, so is my, are you sure that my number of rows are going to increase or decrease? I send it and my ID is changed from, my ID remains the same. My name is changed to updated 2. Can I see the change here? Yes, I can see the change here. But is there any change in the hard disk space given to your table? No, it doesn't. That means it is idempotent. Very important thing to remember, idempotency is when you hit a particular server, n number of times with the same request, your response should also be same. Secondly, the memory area given to that particular table or that particular resource should also not change, which is not in the case of post because number of rows are getting updated, which is the case of put because number of rows are not increasing or decreasing. It remains the same, just the value on that particular memory location changes. So if I try to get an employee ID 1, if I hit with the same number of times with the same request, my response remains the same and there is no change in the database table also. I'll refresh. The get operation doesn't change anything here. That means it is idempotent. So I've proved that get is idempotent. I have proved that post is not idempotent because the number of rows increases. I've also proved that put is also idempotent because the rows doesn't change. It's just the data on that particular memory location changes. Now comes the delete. Now this is tricky part and I'll say it is idempotent because it is for the one time it says it is deleted. Second, all the times it remains the same, and hence I can say that delete is an idempotent method. So I'll give you an example. If I try to delete an ID with 3, so only the first time your data is changed. So I can show you here. I had 3 here. If I refresh it, the 3 is moved. So only the first time. Any number of time if I try to hit it again and again, my response doesn't change. It says 500 internal server error. If you have handled it correctly, it should say 404. Your ID is not found, as I can show you in the console. It's again and again going to say, sorry, your ID is not present. ID 3 exists. That means there is no class with 3 ID exists. So this is the same constant response. So once you delete 10, 15, 20, any number of time you try to delete, there won't be any change in any number of record just for the first one. So that is why I can say it is idempotent because just one operation doesn't matter. N number of times you hit again, delete and delete and delete, it is going to respond you with the same result, 500, sorry. So this is idempotent. If this is clear, I'll be going to cover the difference between the patch and put and what is the options in the few seconds. Now, what are the features of RESTful web services? The RESTful web services feature we have seen, it is based on client server model. Secondly, HTTP protocol is used. So what do you think we are using here to get the data? That is nothing but HTTP. So you sit anywhere in the world. If you have access to this particular server with this particular and this particular URL is open to all with the public domain, then you will be able to hit anywhere from anywhere, not just at the local machine. So HTTP protocol is used for fetching the data and resource. The medium of communication is called messaging. This is a tricky part I'll cover in the few seconds. Resources are accessible using the means of URI. So this is the 3 important part of any RESTful web services. Resource, the URI to access resource, and the methods with which you are accessing the resource. So there are 5-6 methods, that is get, post, put, delete, option and patch. I'll cover difference between put and patch. If you know, let me know in the comment section. And also I'm going to demonstrate options. I have not done this right now because of the simplicity of this first part. If you want me to cover that, you can cover that in the next part. Only if you want me to cover that, because it comes in a trickier and some advanced level interview questions. This is something similar to the first or intermediate level of interview questions. It follows the stateless concept. Now you'll ask me what is stateless. So as per the REST architecture, the RESTful web services should not keep a client state on server. So if you can see, every time I'm going to send the same request, you have to send some body. So I'll give you one example. This is my get method, okay? If you can see in my header, I don't have anything. Now if I put except here and I'm expecting application/JSON, okay, and I send. So if I send this, I get a response in application/JSON format. So every time I will hit this particular URI, then every time I have to send except application/JSON to get the data in the application/JSON format. So this means that RESTful web services does not keep any client state on server. So every time you hit this particular URL, you have to send your headers every time. You don't expect that abhi 2 seconds pehle I hit with the ID 1, I expect the same thing. Why do I have to always send you the headers? You should remember that I'm sending you a request with this particular URL which is unique, you should always give me applications and JSON. Server will say, no, I am stateless. I'm not going to save any of your client data. If you want to hit me again, you come back with your headers. You should come back with all the things that I require to give you the response. That is why it is stateless. If you hit once or 100 times, server is not going to remember you. Every time you want something, give it in the header and then only you will get a response. This restriction is called as statelessness. It is responsibility of client to pass its context to server, and then server can store this context to process the client's request further. That is why the session maintained by server is always identified by the client's identifier passed to server. That means the session is never stored on server. Session is always stored on client side, and every time you send from the client, and then the server understand, oh, you are the one who requests for applications as JSON. So every time you have to send it. Now we have many more things to cover, but we have like advantages, disadvantages, and many more things. The swagger we need to cover, but this is again advanced level. If you want me to cover all these things, please let me know in the comment section. I'll create the second part of this, that is the advanced part of this. Thank you.